Hello, beautiful. Before we begin today, I would love to gently and clearly say and share that this episode does talk about trauma, control, needless emotional turmoil, exhaustion, anger, and losing access for a time to the skills in myself, even after having done this work for so many years. There's nothing graphic and nothing sensational, yet it is honest. So please listen in a way that feels the most supportive to you. Pause if you need to, breathe when it feels tight, and remember that there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect just as you are. There is no shame in whatever it is. So let's take a deep breath together as we begin. And in the last episode, I shared the moments where everything seemed to collide last year for me: job loss, grief, identity challenges, and the night that my mom passed, and how love and gratitude held me in ways that I never could have imagined, thanks in large part to these amazing skills. And today I'd love to share about what came afterwards. The part that doesn't get shared enough in my experience: what happens when the adrenaline wears off, the checklist is done, the casseroles stop coming, the part when, in my experience, there can be a secret shame or even silence that creeps in. When everyone else thinks that you're through it, you made it, you're strong, you're capable, and inside, you're really, really feeling like you're not. Quite the opposite. And last summer, I lived in kind of a daze. I can look back and I can see it. The months all kind of ran together. And I showed up with others with love. I cared for others. I took care of my family. I worked. I held space. I supported my clients, and many of whom were thriving and having so many amazing wins. And I even smiled and laughed a little bit, although it often felt really hollow inside. And looking back and recognizing how I was feeling during that time, I'm not sure how I did that. I wasn't really taking very good care of myself. I wasn't creating, doing self care, dreaming, marketing, believing in myself. I wasn't socializing. I wasn't doing my normal daily routines and structure. I felt like I was drowning. I was surviving, and I was doing it quietly inside without letting anybody really know what was going on inside of me at first. And on the outside, I looked functional, I believe. And on the inside, I felt very, very lost and alone. And this is the part that I would love to name clearly, because it's where shame often lives, I find. I felt that I had lost access to myself, my very being, to my skills, my own personal vision for how I want to show up, my own emotional regulation, to the woman that over the years I had come to trust and to believe in as capable and strong, and had even started to believe was worthy of love. I knew what I should do. I knew what I would do or invite a woman to if I was supporting her, and I just couldn't seem to do it. And that terrified me, because my work, this work, helping other women reconnect, heal, restore, love themselves, live a joyous relationship, create their vision for their life, heal families, is not just what I do. It's honestly, for me, it feels like who I am. It's my passion, it's my purpose. And suddenly, I couldn't find my own way back to myself, much less really get a clear view of what the next step in that vision was. And something else surfaced in me during that time that surprised me, and it was anger, at times even rage. And I had never really processed anger or rage before. I tend to share often that I might get angry at times. It takes a lot to get me there, but I process it and I move through it pretty quickly usually. Not last summer. And I was, in my belief, pretty good at many of the other feelings. Once I got used to it, I believe I was good at feeling vulnerability. I was good at compassion, good at gratitude, and in general, just good at naming, feeling, experiencing, processing, integrating emotions and feelings, not ignoring them, and helping others do the same. I was also good at expressing hard things in a gentle and loving way. But now, with anger and even rage showing up there, that rage, it felt raw and unrefined and so unfamiliar to me. I was angry when I wasn't spending time caring for others. It seemed to be almost a default. It's what would come up for me. And I didn't even really know what I was angry about. And that was the hard part. I didn't know how to process it. I felt angry at the world. I was angry at loss. I was angry at how unfair it all felt. I, I was just angry all the time. And I didn't want to be around me, much less, want to experience and put others in that place. And sometimes that anger came out sideways, even though I did my very best to process it inside for me. And there was no rhyme or reason when it would come up or the intensity. It seemed to come out of nowhere sometimes. I found myself out of character, slamming doors, yelling, blaming, going back to criticizing and control, and gratitude felt unreachable. I, I wanted to heal it. I wanted to not show up that way. I remembered what my vision for myself was. So, not knowing what to do, I found myself, instead of asking for help, withdrawing and isolating, going into a cocoon of sorts. And I went into silence. I stopped leaving the house. I spent a lot of time alone. And then, as I would have just a moment of air, I would experience shame for feeling all of that anger and rage and not understanding, not being able to process, or for showing up in ways that were counter to what my vision for myself is, and not being able to control it better in a more graceful or dignified way. Because that's my vision for myself, to show up with love and respect and dignity and compassion and grace. And I can often do that pretty well for others. Myself is a different story. And during this time frame, I couldn't access those beautiful emotions that were caring and gentle at all for myself. It was my way of being, my vision for how I wanted to show up, because I wanted to do that no matter what was happening in my life. Because what I had learned through the practice of these skills was that that's how I created connection. That's how I liked how I showed up. That's how I didn't get in a situation where I was apologizing all the time or in needless emotional turmoil. And I guess most importantly, it was how I believed that I was able to save my marriage from divorce, to save my family. And it's what I teach. It's who I am, or so I really thought until this happened. And I started questioning that. And that's where my fraud story, that mean girl story, started. It started showing up. And I started asking myself in the moments of isolation, how can I help others when I can't seem to help myself right now? And even feeling like a fraud in a sense of, how can my clients be experiencing wonderful wins and I'm struggling when I get on calls to share wins of my own and feel like I'm literally unraveling and questioning, what does that say about me, who I am? my identity. Here we go with identity again, right? And I would love to share this clearly because it's an important moment. This isn't about hypocrisy. For me, what I realized was this is trauma, needless emotional turmoil. Call it what you will. But whichever that is, under high intensity, what I experienced was that trauma, needless emotional turmoil, doesn't erase the skills, yet it did block my access to them temporarily, demanding my attention. And what I also find is that caregivers, especially women who have held others for years or even decades, are often the last to collapse, the last to see themselves, the last to be willing to ask for help, the last to give themselves permission to take a pause and reset and fall apart if we need to. In my experience, we will stand happily for everyone else until we crumble inside. And what it was doing when I was experiencing all of this, I can look back and see now, was that it was signaling for me that I was ready to release another layer, heal another piece of my own feminine self-worth, those mean girl fear stories. And it was demanding my attention. It needed me to pay attention to it, work through it, love it, accept it, even in all the messiness that I was feeling. And as the layers peeled back, old pain started to surface along with it. Memories, body responses, flashbacks, things that I have processed, that I thought I had processed. It was just another layer of them. There were stories about my marriage and stories about my own worthiness. There was trauma from childhood abuse that came up that I had already acknowledged and done a lot of inner work through. But what I recognize and what I do know from this work is that none of this work is linear. I can heal a layer and work my way through it and have some amazing wins and good years that I feel like it's quiet. And then out of the blue sometimes, without sometimes even any rhyme or reason, it comes back to visit me to heal another layer. And I have found for me that this has an uncanny ability to resurface when my nervous system is already on overload. And I'm not sure what the correlation is about that. I do have my guesses, yet I know that for me, that's when it comes up. And it's not because I had failed to previously do the work or heal or adopt the skills or support myself in ways that worked through a lot of this. Actually, I recognize now that it came up for me at that time during intense pressure and a lot of intensity from what had already happened earlier in the year, because I did do the work. I had, through doing the work, created enough space for another layer to come up and to heal. And that doesn't always look pretty or gentle. And that's where the anger came from, this deeper layer. And my system was just simply asking for more love and an even deeper amount of safety to heal. And that realization, that awareness, it changed everything for me. It changed how I approached it. Instead of beating myself up and hiding and isolating, I started loving the emotions. I started letting myself feel them. I started processing, and I even started asking for help if I needed it. And at some point, not dramatically all at once, because this was a pretty big layer, I saw it. I saw that this wasn't a defect in me. It wasn't something I had missed or something I had done wrong. It was a trauma loop. It was needless emotional turmoil over and over again with mean girl stories, bringing up what just needed to surface for some love. It wasn't a bad season. It wasn't a mindset issue. And it also wasn't just grief. And for a long time, I believed that's what it was. It wasn't a discipline problem. My body was stuck in what it believed was a threat and was alternating between fight and freeze, depending on what I was feeling at the moment. Or even fawn after I would feel the guilt and shame and want to apologize over and over and over again, which I know for me is not necessarily the way I want to show up. Yet my nervous system just couldn't settle. My mind was trying to control what my body was afraid to feel. I was trying to push it away. And the more I resisted, the more it persisted. And it was like it was pounding. No, it's time to release this layer. We won't be ignored anymore. We need you to feel this anger. And that recognition, it mattered, because I've learned that I cannot think or control my way out of my feelings. I have to tend my way out, integrate them, love them with care and space and gentleness, to reach for help with vulnerability if that's what I need, or just give myself a break, or let myself crawl up in the ball in the middle of my bed and cry. Or yes, at least more than a few times last summer, slam a couple doors. And once I stopped trying to control myself and the timeline and the pace at which I believe I should be healing, and allow myself to be real and to truly care for myself in the way that I need from a place of self-love, healing can then start to truly begin to happen. And when I finally understood what was happening, I did something very different. I retreated instead of using the anger to lash out with blame and criticism and even slamming doors. And I didn't retreat from the skills or from love or from my family, but I had to retreat from the fear of allowing myself to feel what I needed to feel and process and integrate it, and my own expectations of what that should look like. And I needed to look at this as a form of self-care. It wasn't bubble baths, it wasn't massages, but it was the self-care I needed at the moment. So I entered my own little cocoon, and for a time I simplified what I could. I rested. I doubled down on really gentle, basic, loving self-care. I also went back into routine because structure seemed to give my body the safety it was craving. And I didn't do all of this as a checklist, but I did it as healing. I also worked on my own self-worth again, not from a place of criticizing myself or beating myself up about what the process was or what I should be doing, but with gentleness and patience and humility and self-love. And I forgave myself for not doing better, for not being further along, for not having processed this all the way the last time. Because the truth is, I processed what I could. And this was just another layer because I was doing the work. I am doing the work. And I stopped demanding that I bounce back on my own timeline. And I let the process just integrate. I let my body, my emotional body, do its thing. Have the space and the love and the kindness and the gentleness from me to do its thing. And I focused on present and gratitude as much as I could, whether I was with myself or with others. And I shared what was happening inside of me as much as I could understand it at the time with my amazing husband, who was trying to help me, to reach me, who I would see staring at me with concern across the room when I thought I was doing a good job hiding it, who would drop off roses or summer bouquets of flowers to me just to brighten my day, because he knows me so well and he knew I was struggling, or would stop me when I was in a moment of distraction walking through the hallway and give me a giant hug and just tell me he loved me so that I would know that he was there. He was trying to reach me, and for a time, I wouldn't let him. I didn't know how. And once I saw this, once I started to process and integrate a little bit, I did open up. I did start to be vulnerable. I did let him in at the pace that felt comfortable and open up with presence and gratitude and just connection. I started expressing my desires again. I started feeling real smiles again. Self-care through this gentle process that wasn't always easy. It started to do its job, and I started to feel more like myself. And slowly, my nervous system began to breathe again. And the skills didn't come back all at once for me. They returned quietly, a little at a time. I returned to myself quietly, a little at a time. In moments of softness, I would recognize that I saw a little more clearly. In tears that I would allow myself to shed without going into stories, and allowing my feelings to be present and to be grateful for them, to be grateful that I could feel them, I could process them, I could be present for them and allow them to heal. And not trying to push them away, but loving them as they resurfaced. And in choosing rest instead of proving my worth or trying to control my own perception of myself or others' perceptions. And I shared with my community what I could understand, the mess that I was experiencing all along the way. And it seemed to resonate for so many of us in this year. And that's why I'm sharing more broadly, in the hopes that by letting the mask completely down and showing real life experience and how these skills can support and heal, even in the mess, it might reach just one woman that feels supported. So I started to allow myself to be seen again. And once again, that made all the difference. Vulnerability started to return, not as just words, but as presence, as tears sometimes, and allowing. My gratitude returned even more deeply, not through a checklist, not through forcing it, but organically in a stolen moment of observing a sunrise, or in the beauty of a client's smile while she was telling me about her win, or in the laughter of my sons watching some anime video in the living room. And it started to return in releasing control and allowing faith and trust to come back. Not a certainty that I knew what this was going to look like or how long it was going to take, but in a willingness and an openness to experiment and allow the process to run its course. And this time, as the skills came back, they came back even deeper, less performative, more automatic, with more grace for myself, more embodiment, and that dignity and grace that is so important to me, that accountability. It's taken on an even more meaningful place in my life as I process through this. So here's what I would love to invite you to consider from the share today. If you might find yourself in a season now or in the past or in the future where it feels like you've lost access to the skills, especially if you're experiencing great stress or pressure or perhaps your own trauma, it doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that they didn't work. It doesn't mean that you were pretending before and that's not who you are. And it doesn't mean that you can't decide what you make it and choose to reset once you're ready. I would invite you to consider that it means that your nervous system, your emotional body, maybe asking for some attention, for some love, for some care, not criticism, not self-blame, just gentleness. And that way to provide that, in my experience, isn't always to try harder or to try to control my emotions. It's to love them and allow them and have compassion for them. And my takeaway from the first 2/3 of 2025 is that I didn't come back to who I was before, although that was my goal for a time. I just wanted to find her again, whoever her is. I did come back though, and I believe it feels like I came back softer and wiser, more honest, more vulnerable, more authentic, more compassionate for myself and others, and more determined than ever to embrace these skills as my way of being for the rest of my life. And to help other women who desire to do the same, to do that in whatever season that they are in, and to support them as I'm supporting myself as well, and not stopping until we get all of our miracle as good as it can stand in our heart's desire, because that's our birthright. And I want to do that with more compassion for myself, more compassion for every woman who has ever whispered, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I seem to do this? Why can't I seem to get it? Why is it not working?" Because what I found was nothing was wrong with me. It was all just part of the process, just like with practicing the skills. It took time to integrate them. It took time to go from concept and intellect into way of being. And it was the same with processing my emotions. And I would love to invite you to believe in yourself in that way as well. I wasn't failing. Something very human was just happening. And it processed, and it passed, and it integrated, and the skills returned more strong than ever. My vision wasn't damaged. The connection that I had built wasn't damaged. I didn't lose them throughout. I learned to practice them in a different way. The skills, they strengthened. They strengthened me, they strengthened my heart, and helped me heal even more. And not because I forced it or tried to control it, that wasn't working, but because I finally stopped fighting it, and I finally started to allow it to just process and happen, and take it one day and one step at a time. So if you're in a season where you feel disconnected from yourself, if anger or numbness has surprised you, if you're feeling fear because what used to work doesn't seem accessible right now, I would love to invite you to hear this, to consider it as your truth. You are not broken. You're not a fraud. You're not doing it wrong. And this is not the end of your story. Not if you want to choose love, connection, faith, and in my experience, these skills. Sometimes it's the beginning of an even deeper embodiment when the skills go missing for me, and the shadow right before the light starts to peek through for even more miracles to start to appear. So if this resonates with you, then I would love to hear in the comments. You're welcome to share what comes up, or even share I'm realizing I may be trying to hide or run, and I want to love myself through this. I want to be gentle and compassionate. Or share that I'm learning to be kinder to myself. Or simply just a declaration that I am still here and I am not giving up. My vision is not done. No fixing, no advice, just presence and witnessing connection. And in the next episode, I'll share how this loop impacted my marriage, where we lost each other for what seemed like a time, and how I got scared about that, how it felt familiar, and I started to panic, and control creeped back in. and how choosing these skills and taking it one day at a time, and how my way of being and my accountability, my vision for how I want to show up brought us back together with even more love and deeper connection. And that story matters, and it deserves its own space, because I believe it is almost the destination of where I was heading last year when I was going through so many of the challenges. And for me, sometimes healing isn't about rising like a rocket. Although I want to get to the stars, it's about resting long enough to remember who I am and then floating just as high as the stars, yet on a gentle balloon at my own timing, at my own pace. It all still gets to the same beautiful place, just on its own timeline. So thank you for being here with me. And we'll keep walking this journey together. And in case you haven't heard this today, I would love to share that I believe in you. I believe in your greatness. I believe in all the possibilities in the world for you, for your relationship, for your vision. And you are worthy. You are enough, just as you are. You're amazing. And the world needs more courageous, wonderful women who have the determination to empower themselves with these skills every day, one step at a time, in its own process, and change generations to come. Because in my experience, it all adds up, even when it feels like it's not. So until next time, I'm sending you all kinds of love.